we always teach our students to get comfortable being uncomfortable. We have a Masters of Innovation program, and that's one of our key mottos. And the reason we tell that to them is because growth and comfort do not coexist. So it's incredibly uncomfortable in healthcare right now, but I'm hoping that means we're in the middle or the beginning stages of what's going to be a massive growth period. And that there's going to be, I don't even know if it's going to be disruptive innovation occurring. I think it's going to be the incremental innovation that we've been saying for years. Like, hey, we just need to do this. Telemedicine, perfect example, not disruptive at all. Everyone knew how to get on a FaceTime or a Zoom call leading up to this pandemic. No one said we could do telehealth, and then all of a sudden it's the only thing we do.
Hello, and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of human ingenuity, clever, inventive, and original thinking. My name is Ken Tenser, curator of Say Hi to the Future and CEO of Spiderworks, a leading business consultancy for mid-market organizations and entrepreneurs globally. With me today is Tim Raderstorf, the first Chief Innovation Officer at the Ohio State University College of Nursing, the #1 public nursing college in the United States. Tim studied and focused on neurosurgical research on tethered spinal cord syndrome, skilling the healthcare workforce in India, developing innovation curriculum, and developing novel commercial innovations to enhance patient outcomes. He is the founder of the Innovation Studio, a movable makerspace Frankenstein together with an incubator to promote interprofessional collaboration at The Ohio State University. The Innovation Studio combines his passions of connecting great people and fostering ideation through the innovation and commercialization process. Like this video if you enjoy our show and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who we should interview next. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Tim, welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Thanks so much for having me, Ken.
Well, it's a pleasure. You know, it's funny. So I'm up in Toronto, Canada, and much to my chagrin, sometimes our favorite trophy is a participation trophy. Now, in your TED Talk, though, you said the participation trophy for innovation and why it works. So why does it work in innovation?
Yeah, so innovation is a numbers game, in my opinion, and actually from some great research that's come from a man named Dylan Miner and his team, who started at the Kellogg School for Management in Northwestern, and then moved on to Sloan at MIT. And they've got some interesting data points that showcase that the ideation rate is the greatest indicator of return on investment when it comes to innovation. And ideation rate, it is a term that you may or may not be familiar with, but essentially it's the number of ideas that are generated by frontline staff with a very important and after that, and that and is and approved by management. So you take those ideas that are generated by frontline staff and approved by management, and you divide that by the total number of people in the system, however many people work in that organization. And with that number, you can determine, the higher that number goes, the greater your return on investment is. Now, when it comes to innovation in areas where I work, like healthcare, and particularly in the field of nursing, although we are, collaborating with peers across all industries, we find that nursing has not typically been empowered to lead innovation in the past. And also in the U.S. health system, nursing units typically don't have the keys or don't have access to the purse strings. So they're not making always the financial decisions at a unit level. So these managers have small budgets. They don't have a lot of ancillary income. So when someone comes to them with a great idea, their hands are usually pretty tied, because no matter how much they believe in the idea, there's not much they can do in terms of giving those people the support and resources they need. Right. So what we've done, and what we talk about in my TED Talk, is created a platform called the Innovation Studio, and it takes that burden off the management team by providing a physical location for anyone who has an idea to answer the question that everyone who has an idea always says. I've got this great idea, I just don't know where to begin. So we've created a physical spot. When you get that idea, the lightning bulb goes off, you walk into the door and you've answered that question. You know where to go when you have that great idea. And then from there, we have a variety of other resources. And another topic I love to talk about, structures of innovation, which some people don't always get because innovation is supposed to be free-flowing and nebulous. But when you add structure to it, it allows for the system to be cyclical and for people to continue to engage. So the thing we do is every team that walks in our door, we give them the permission to innovate and the validation that their ideas are worth pursuing. And the way we provide that validation is by something called inspirational capital. And that can be the form of grants. So every team who pitches an idea to us gets at least $250 up to $1,500 for their first pitch. And then after that, they're encouraged to come back every 7 weeks as we have the next pitch day and tell us what they've done with those resources and how they can continue to achieve their goals. But the other forms of inspirational capital we use are access to 3D printers and laser cutters, really cool prototyping materials. And we also provide them with, I think, the most effective piece of inspirational capital. And that's just the sit down conversation saying, hey, I see you, I see what you're doing. This is exactly what we do in our organization. We try and change the world and we believe in you. So that's why we think the participation trophy model for innovation works, is because it shifts ownership of the innovation back to the people at the front lines, and it empowers them to continue to come forward and saying, you are the fuel that we're going to use to achieve these goals.
Well, I love that. And when you explain it that way, I really, I see the importance, and I see very much what you're trying to do, and the fact that it becomes measurable. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I do, I've done a lot of work around entrepreneurship, which is obviously internal entrepreneurship, or some people call it corporate entrepreneurship. Yeah. And one of the things that I find, though, is you really need to engage the sponsor, the mentor, and the innovator in it. And so to me, it almost bakes in approval by management, or at least an understanding or empathy by management. So how important is that in what you're doing? Because again, it was striking me that if you look for approval after the fact rather than prior to or during, you might be handcuffing a team.
Exactly. So I think that the model we have, where the management team is usually the referring agent. Mm-hmm. So someone comes to them and says, I have this great idea. Well, typically these people are heads down saving lives, particularly over the last, 24 months. And, to be honest, well before that timeline. So they're not always paying attention to a new box, this movable innovation studio, the space that we've set up in their lobby, or they walk by it and aren't really sure what they're supposed to do in there. So usually the manager ends up being the referring agent, and they're engaged from the start. And then they also don't have to carry the burden of that project in our model. So they're not engaged with further resourcing decisions. When the team pitches to us, their manager isn't there saying, hey, I think you should only give them X or Y. If their manager comes, it's because they're there to support them, and they're either part of their team or just want to cheer them on. But then they don't have that burden, and not everything makes it to the finish line. So they don't also have to be the no, and then have that the pain of that lasting, ongoing struggle on their unit, where they say, I can't go talk to Tim about my ideas because he told me no last time. Well, if there's an environment where it's always a yes, then those relationships on the front end, the relationships that are the daily relationships, the management employee type relationships, don't get constrained because resources are thin. They end up, having me to blame, which I think is the way the system should be set up. If there's things that aren't successful, it shouldn't be within the confines of your own, within your own unit. That's why we build our structure this way, so that those politics and those feelings aren't part of the process.
Well, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, for me too, innovation teams, it's shared success. It's shared lack of success, if you will. Mm-hmm. I'm not a big failure person. The other thing, though, is you're describing it. What I love is the communication. And, a lot of people, when I first enter an organization and we're going to work with them on innovation, it's, people get disengaged or whatnot, when their idea doesn't go forward. I always say, I don't think it's that their idea hasn't been chosen or doesn't make it over the finish line. It's that we haven't communicated to them at the beginning a clear vision or a clear parameter.
Mhm.
And we certainly haven't communicated them through or close to the finish line why it might not be right for the organization. So how do you do that, especially if they're walking by this booth in the lobby, if you will?
Yeah. Well, it's a prolonged process. So we have 5 pitch days throughout the year. So they come to us through any one of those, and at the end of each one of those, we give them a milestone to achieve, usually collectively designated, and saying, "Hey, it sounds like the next thing you need to do is this, and it'll probably cost this amount of money and these resources. So go meet with these people. Let us know when you need to purchase these things, and then go out and test it." And at that point, we may know that it's not going to be a home run, but instead of saying no and not investing $250 to a team that, Ken, I'm wrong all the time. So,
Yeah.
me
Got it.
saying no to an idea is I think probably pretty close to being a flip of a coin or whether or not I'm going to be right or wrong. And that model's the same for venture capital and many other things across healthcare. So to think that at the ideation stage we have the capacity to say yes or no to something, that's not really feasible for us to assume that we're going to be doing too great on guessing those metrics. So instead, we allow these people to continue their journey for a very small investment. And then usually they find out on their own that there are significant barriers that are going to be in front of them. And they get to decide, are they going to walk around those barriers? Are they going to knock those barriers down? Or are they going to stop in their tracks there and say, you know what, I've got 5 other ideas that I think aren't going to have as many barriers in front of me. Let's go back to the drawing board.
Right.
So instead of, us again being the no, we're happy to be the no when it needs to happen. But most of the time, it's usually self-discovery. It's people getting to that point on their own. And that's a really empowering process for them because they're learning along that way. All those no's, all those barriers are just key data points that are helping point them in the right direction for whatever the next step is.
Yeah. Well, and as you talk about it that way, it really resonates with me. I mean, you're talking about empowerment, you're talking about self-discovery, and the reality is, I mean, look, I'm definitely a little bit older than you. We were taught that we should have all the answers. I mean,
Yeah.
look, that's 30 odd years ago in business school. That's the first cut at business school. That's definitely what we were taught. And I think it's really hard to come around and understand that not only do we not, it's impossible today.
Yeah.
With today's rate of change. So how do you introduce that? Especially, I mean, you're so enmeshed with the healthcare system where, I mean, rightfully, there's certain protocols that might not change quickly for good patient care. So how do you work in that environment within innovation?
Actually, I think healthcare is, in the US, we had the Institute of Medicine's report to Err is Human back in 2001, which showcased that on average, somewhere between 275,000 and 400,000 people, 275,000 and 400,000 people in the United States die every year because of human errors that are conducted in the healthcare environment. So, for a long time, we've been coming to terms with the fact that our processes, our practices are incredibly well-intentioned, but not always moving towards the outcomes that we'd like for them to. So I'm finding, and particularly over the last 2 years, everyone's in agreement right now that the system's broken. And we don't have, and no one has a viable answer moving forward. So there's actually a little bit of comfort in the unknown right now. And I'm hopeful. We always teach our students to get comfortable being uncomfortable. We have a Masters of Innovation program, and that's one of our key mottos. And the reason we tell that to them is because growth and comfort do not coexist. So it's incredibly uncomfortable in healthcare right now, but I'm hoping that means we're in the middle or the beginning stages of what's going to be a massive growth period. And that there's going to be, I don't even know if it's going to be disruptive innovation occurring. I think it's going to be the incremental innovation that we've been saying for years. Like, hey, we just need to do this. Telemedicine, perfect example. Not disruptive at all. Everyone knew how to get on a FaceTime or a Zoom call leading up to this pandemic. No one said we could do telehealth. And then all of a sudden, it's the only thing we do. So, I think these incremental innovations are going to be what's laying the next 5 to 10 years of innovation in healthcare. And then hopefully from there, we can figure out how we as humans want to interact with each other, because there are some disruptive things on the horizon. And we need to collectively decide as clinicians how we're going to create the future of healthcare. Because for a long time, clinicians haven't been very involved in that, particularly nurses. And we need to step up and make sure that our voices are heard in a way that hasn't been in the past.
So where does this passion come from? I mean, because, passion, savage curiosity, audacity, those are, they're three of the values of the show. There happen to be three of my values as an entrepreneur. But today, I mean, when you speak about healthcare, when you speak about nursing and innovation, there's such passion for what you do. Where does that start?
I think it just comes down to making a difference, wanting to make a difference, I should say. One of the best things about healthcare is it's a team environment. You're always on a team. Now, it could be you and one person in a dark room with a tube in their throat and they can't communicate. But boy, you two are sure pulling for the same outcomes in that environment. And then it expands. And you have your clinical team, you have the family, you have so many people who are wanting to have impact, make whatever outcome, whether it's saving someone's life or helping someone gracefully pass on. That team environment, that the collective goal is always there in healthcare. And I think that's where a lot of my passion comes from, is just wanting to make that experience as formidable, as positive as possible for people. And then, the other awesome thing is that there aren't a lot of people doing this work right now in healthcare. And, I think my profession of nursing has been leading this work for a very long time. But because of the gender dynamics that occur in healthcare, nursing has been put on the bottom of the hierarchy, and that's been really challenging for their voices to be heard. But many of the things that have impacted healthcare over years have been brought up by the front lines. And I think finding a way to have nurses more involved is just the right thing to do. They're the people who create or deliver 90% of care worldwide. So, consider any other industry where you had 90% of people doing all the work, but they were perhaps some of the least represented people when it came to your administrative team. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I'm sure you learned that in B school.
Sure.
So, it just seems to me like change has to occur. There have been many giants who have come before me who have tried to move this mountain, and I'm standing on their shoulders and helping push as hard as I can.
Well, you seem to be doing something quite remarkable. I mean, when I look at it now, so you are the first Chief Innovation Officer at Ohio State University's College of Nursing, which I believe is the number one public college for nursing in the country. So, that's quite a step. That's quite a title. And it's quite a leap for the university in some ways. So, what made them take that leap and take it with you?
I think first off, it's having a really visionary leader. So Dr. Bernadette Melnick is our dean at the College of Nursing. She is an entrepreneur. She also is our vice president of health promotion and the chief wellness officer for our university. So one of the first nurses to ever have that role at one of the largest public health systems in the United States. So she always talks about dreaming, discovering, and delivering. And she's got a big dream on how that has to occur, and having a structure of innovation was one of those key things. So knowing that, having a champion for innovation, having me in a role where I loved all the things that I was doing, but my job description wasn't directly focused and my KPIs weren't directly focused on innovation deliverables, then if I left the organization, are they going to find another person who wants to do what I want to do? In academia, that, there's always a lot of people, but not always people where passions align. So she had that foresight to say, all right, let's build a structure of innovation by starting with this chief innovation officer role. We'll be the first college in the world to have this in the College of Nursing. And, we'll build the foundation. And then when you and I leave the organization, there will be people who will backfill that position, and the structure of innovation continues to thrive even when we're not there championing it. So I think that's really what it comes down to, is having leadership who's committed to change, committed to impact. And I don't know what she saw in me, but I'm very grateful for it. And together with the team that she's created, we've been able to have a lot of incredibly impactful initiatives over the 5.5 years I've been in that role now.
Well, that's great. I think even via podcast, we can guess that she saw the passion and in interest in who you are and what you do. So great credit to her and great credit to yourself. Now, so we've talked a little bit about, we'll call the front end part of it, having the ideas and measuring the ideas and, per number person in an organization. How do you see those through? How do you ultimately figure out that they are successful or not? Because commercialization is that's the tough part.
That's the incredibly tough part. And we admittedly at the Innovation Studio are fortunate that we get to punt the commercialization aspect to our technology commercialization office.
Okay.
So, but what we do have is an amazing team of students and a shop manager in our Innovation Studio who are, experts in multiple means of manufacturing. So they help get things off the ground. And then we connect them to the network that exists within Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And eventually that gets them to the point where we decide if this is a commercialization path, because some things are policy focused. Some things people want to change some structuring within their system. And we're able to do that without going the commercial route. But then we have multiple things that we've tried to license and have successfully licensed a few during our time. We have books that have been written. But, the commercialization aspect, the ideas, going into this, I wouldn't have said ideas are a dime a dozen. I feel like that was a really demeaning statement, but sure. While it may be demeaning, until you have to do the work on the back end, you realize that the ideation fact is really the easiest part of that equation. So, as the Innovation Studio, because we're not running the commercial process, we're doing a handoff at that point. When you think of the technology commercialization funnel, we go to a tornado analogy or funnel cloud analogy.
Sure.
So, with a tornado, the most powerful aspect of it is not the funnel cloud itself. It's actually, those are usually about 200 to 400 feet tall. But above that, for 40,000 feet, is this supercell. And that's where all this collision and energy is being created. And, you've got a cow running into a tractor and things that aren't supposed to be meeting each other in those spaces. And that's what we want to be creating. We want to be creating these really weird and dynamic, energetic collisions of people, so that a nursing student is talking with a design student, or a business student is sitting down with a music major, and together they're dreaming up what the future looks like. And collectively, they are the ones who are creating that future. So that's where we view ourselves, as being in that superstorm. And then hopefully with some of those collisions, we're bringing them down into a commercialization funnel, but other ones may spin out and go a different direction, and we'll, help support them along that way too.
No, that's excellent. And again, I love when you talked about the studio and how in front of people it is, or in their face, if you will. I think that's an incredible model. So just switching gears a little bit. There was a term that I read, and I'll preface this by saying I'm also an adjunct prof of innovation, and I preface it that way because this seemed like an oxymoron. Head of academic entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
What is academic entrepreneurship, and how do you make me believe that really exists?
Well, that's a good question. So this is for a spin out at Ohio State called the Raderstorf Institute. Okay. And the Raderstorf Institute is committed and focused on career success for PhD students. So in the United States, we graduate about 40,000 PhD students in the sciences each year. They're competing for about 3,000 PhD academic positions.
Okay.
So, less than 10% are getting that dream job that they set out to get. And we're told, hey, if you just keep your head down and do everything right, you're going to get that dream job. And, you're the smartest kid in your class, you can absolutely do this. And instead we destroy 90% of that workforce because there's nothing for them on the back end. So what we've been trying to do at the Raderstorf Institute when we started in 2017, it was all focused on helping these people find career pathways in industry, whether that be as data scientists, working in AI, various career paths that are part of their PhD training, but not necessarily focused on this is what you can go do with the work. So the Raderstorf Institute started this platform to help these people find employment after the PhDs, after completing their PhDs. And then, as we are, doing the things that we talked about in the innovation studio of listening to our customers and seeing what the outcomes were, started finding that a lot of these people were going to startups and wanted to work at or have their own startup based off of their research. So we are now, in the last 2 years, have taken the steps to have this entrepreneurship arm where we are connecting PhD students to early stage companies and also giving them a platform and steps to, if you were going to try to commercialize your research, here are the people that you need to be talking to, connecting them to seed and angel investors, and really just laying that platform out there for them. So it's all about helping them find success, but it's definitely not in the traditional academic environment where you have a lab with a technology that's been dusted on the shelf for a long time. You dust it off and run around with a hammer looking for a nail scenario.
That's great. And I mean, kidding aside, the way I introduced it, I think that, well, many universities and many academics or PhDs, I mean, the insights, the thoughtfulness, what they have created is incredible, and finding a path to market, that teams up with business.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that's an incredible need. So again, kudos on that model, the way it's being built.
Thanks. I can't take any credit for that. That's our founder, Roman Holowinski. But to your point, systems are designed to get the outcomes that they get. They're perfectly designed for those for the outcomes they get. So the way that we're currently training our PhD students is probably some of the methodology and some of the reasoning why we're not getting the commercial outcomes that we believe in, because we're pushing them towards promotion and tenure and NIH and NSF funded grants, government funded grants. And I think if we had a little bit more of focus on impact and bringing things to the commercial market when these people are getting trained versus after the fact, we may be a little bit more successful in seeing what we can actually make happen in the real world.
I have been speaking with Tim Raderstorf, who is the first Chief Innovation Officer at the Ohio State University College of Nursing. Tim, as we wrap up today, there's one title I would love to have, and I'm wondering if you can tell us about it. It's called Curator of Curiosity. Where does that come from?
Sure. One big fan of alliteration. So this is a self-appointed title that I made up of being a curator of curiosity. But with my role, I get to hang out with a lot of people who affectionately refer to themselves as nerds, people like us who geek out and love the things. They have passion for the technologies or the pathways that they're working on. And one of the key aspects I think often is missing from those environments is the connector. So I love serving as the connector between people like us who have maybe divergent passions, but maybe there's a connection between the two. So being the curator of curiosity is, always coming in a conversation with someone and saying, oh, I know Ken's excited about this. I have to introduce him to Samantha, or figuring out where those connections exist. Because again, as we talked about passion, it all comes back to that impact. And, I know that I can be much more impactful if I empower other people to achieve their goals than I can be if I just focus on what I'm passionate about.
Well, thank you, Tim, curator, connector, Chief Innovation Officer. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Ken, it was my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks.